Well, welcome to See Hear Love. I'm your host, Melinda Estabrooks, and today we're talking about solo parenting, hope and healing for the single mom and dad. In 2017, there were about 1.64 million single parent families living in Canada, and there are approximately 13.7 million single parents in the United States today. Well, this topic is big and it's close to our hearts, as each one of us around the table has been in a solo parent situation, whether raised by a single parent, being a single parent ourselves, or a spouse that was raised by a single mom. This conversation today is much needed. And to share their thoughts on their personal experiences with single parenting, I have co-host Cheryl. Welcome.
Mm-hmm. Good to be here.
Yes, Jen, welcome.
Here.
Kimberly here. And a very special guest, all the way from Nashville, Robert Beeson.
Yeah.
Welcome.
Thank you, ladies.
Now, Robert, I'm just going to gush a little bit because I want our viewers and ourselves to kind of know a little bit about you. So here's a little bit of a bio about Robert. Robert is a former high-level executive in the music industry who helped develop and guide some of my favorite artists, including Michael W. Smith, Casting Crowns, Jars of Clay, and Third Day. When his wife of 13 years separated from him, he was left to raise his 3 young daughters on his own, and this experience led him to found Solo Parent Society, which exists to unify, equip, and empower single parents. Robert also co-hosts a Solo Parent Society weekly podcast with...
You know.
There we go. And has authored a book titled Going Solo, Hope and Healing for the Single Mom or Dad, which we're going to talk about later in the show. Robert is also the founder and director of I Shine, a Christian media group dedicated to ministering to preteens and their families. And he is now remarried, woo, and resides in Tennessee with his daughters and 3 new stepsons.
Yes.
Welcome.
That's a mouthful.
You got a lot. I know, I was like this. There's a lot of stuff happening with you, Robert.
You should take a nap.
Let's take a nap.
All right. Well, first of all, let's talk about, I said solo and single parenting all in that intro, right? It was like solo, single. Oh, why do you say solo versus single?
I think it's a really important distinction because, like you said, the stats are so enormous. 1 in 3 U.S. homes are single-parented homes. Right. So it's kind of become a new normal in our society. Kind of like something you would just check off on a form, like race or age. And I just think that that's a real shame because being a single parent is not normal at all. It is not the way God intended it to be. And so I thought in framing this conversation, we should look for words that don't just go, oh yeah, it's just for single parents. I wanted to get the attention and say, no, this is not a status, this is a condition. This is a condition of the hearts and homes of 1/3 of our population in America. So the idea of solo actually in Italy, the Italian is exclusive. And so there's a double meaning to the idea of solo. Solo is a distinction that is different from single, but it is also, probably more importantly, the way God sees us. He sees us exclusive. He sees and pursues our hearts exclusive, not to the roles that we play, but to who we are and who we were created to be.
I love that. I really like that definition. So solo parenting, I really like that. Before we get into your experience as a solo parent, let's talk about your story. So you're a high-level exec. You're working with artists that people love and know all over the world. You've got a family, you're married, and it looks great from the outside, right? Grammy Award-winning executive. What's going on? Because I think, and I want to say this because I think a lot of families are like that. It's like, here's our family, we're projecting it looks great, but inside, things aren't so great.
I think it happens to a lot of us, like you say, whether it's executives, pastors. You hear about the casualties of ministry sometimes as being the kids, the kids and wives become kind of second fiddle. And for me, although from the outside you could say things were going well, we were having an amazing impact on culture with the music. I had 3 beautiful daughters and a house, and we traveled all the time and had a great life from the outside. And I was definitely at the beck and call of my girls. It wasn't like I was out doing my own thing. I was not present with them. I was going through the motions. And so what I found in myself was I was just executing the roles that I played, executive, father, husband, and I don't know that I was really entrenched in any of them, really, to the extent that I needed to be. Not to mention, for me, I grew up on the mission field, so when I came back and all the success happened so quickly, I dove really hard into that. I mean, I loved it. It was like a kid in a candy store, with all kinds of trips and Grammy parties and, traveling the world. And so I made sure to kind of check the boxes of making sure I was home when I needed to be at home. but my head wasn't necessarily at home. And I think that's the thing that breeds dysfunction in relationships. And when we are so consumed with the roles that we play, and we are not really tuned in or present with the people, with the souls that we live life with.
Whoa. I just got goosebumps.
That's good.
I have to jump in because it's like bing, 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 bing. You said, and I quote, "My head was not at home." Okay, that's hitting me because you would think that, oh, his heart is not at home, but your heart was with your family, but your head wasn't, which tells me that, you know, you can love and love and love, but if you're not present and engaged, that's powerful. To me, it just changed my whole perspective. You could say, oh, my heart's with my family and my heart's at home, but is your head there? Are you thinking of us?
Yeah.
Present.
Is that an important distinction? Yeah.
Right, isn't that, please.
Because I mean, it really is a deliberate act. It's not something that, you know, when we go through the motions of living in the culture, we are constantly stimulated by the roles that we play and the messages that we're getting, the voices that we're hearing. So our head is anywhere. And so for me, the divorce and becoming a solo parent was the most significant thing to happen to me because it kind of put a wall. I ran to the end of my responsibilities and the roles that I played, and I had to just be present with what I had to deal with right at that moment.
And I love your man saying this. I mean, I think that for a man to say my head wasn't there and taking responsibility, Robert, you say, you know, I wasn't present. I was doing all these things, but I actually wasn't there. That's big.
Yeah.
Well, it's easy to do. Even I'm married again, and you know, I have 6 kids, 3, you know, 3 of my own and 3 stepkids, and it's hard. It's hard to be present. It's hard to keep your mind there. It's a discipline. I don't think we default to like being completely present and being in the now.
That's a little convicting because I'll be honest, like my husband Chris, hi honey. One of the biggest challenges is he says, because you know, especially when you're in ministry, you're doing great work for God.
Right.
But he has called me out to say, but you're not present here with me and the kids. And I'm like, oh, I'm here. I'm sitting having dinner with you.
Right.
He's like, but you're not present. You're not engaging in the conversation. You're not feeling it with us. And I have to admit, there are times I'm out here. What's the next show? You know, working on board reports, right? That's key. What about for you, Jen? You're kind of like, yep.
Oh, yeah, no, I mean, I think that being present is so key in just, I don't know, figuring it all out. And for me, it's letting God into those relationships because we can just get so busy that we kind of forget what it's all for, even when we're doing good things. I mean, for me, it was, I think my marriage ended with a combination of I went through postpartum depression. I had a son who was going through a lot of medical things. And so, you know, I'm just digging into like getting things done and we're not doing things as a family and I'm not leaning on God. I was leaning a lot on me. Like I have to get this done and I have to get these hospital visits done and I have to do this, that, and the other. And so, you know, in my second marriage now, I work at being a lot more thoughtful and planful and what does God want for my family. So, you know, I think that helps your head and your heart align is when you can bring the Lord into it.
Yeah, that's good. Kim?
Well, I think like Robert, and I know Robert well, and we talk about this all the time, but it's when I became a single mama that the whole being present thing was radically changed everything for me. And especially when my mama said, Kimberly, dear, oh, she always says, the children are not going to care about the dishes and that you vacuumed today. They're going to care about how much time you spent with them. So like, that's when it all, I mean, all of our lives have changed, marriages have changed for different reasons, but you're so dead on.
Yeah.
You're so good. Like that's so, we need to hear
good
it all the
reminder.
time.
Well, it's something that we need to do. And Kim and I do a podcast together. And one of the ones I was listening to, it just came out a couple weeks ago, was talking about real time with your kids, about how it's easy for us to excuse spending time.
Yes.
But you know, well, yeah, I did that. I checked that out. You know, but are you really there? Are you like really? Because I think she says in the podcast, like we're raising champions. We're investing in these souls. Like this isn't just duties and behaviors. These are people that God entrusted us with. And so we need to take care of that.
And kids love the simplest things. Like when I was in my first marriage, we had a lot of, you know, very elaborate trips and, you know, we kind of did all these very elaborate things with the children. And then when I was on my own, you know, you tend to scale back financially. And so we would be in, you know, a different kind of hotel and we would be watching, we always watch the Food Network whenever we travel, because no matter where you are in the world, they have the Food Network, right? So we're watching some kind of Food Network show. And like, it was so great. And it was those simple things. And it really did, I mean, I look at it now as a gift in terms of my relationship with with my biological kids, because I have stepkids now too, but that we had those simple times. We were sort of forced to scale back and think of what's important. And a lot of it just, their best memories are kind of sitting in some random hotel room somewhere watching Food Network. So, you know.
Yeah. So Robert, you have this life. You've acknowledged that you weren't present. You've got 3 daughters, and you're married. And 13 years?
Yes.
13 years you're married, and then she leaves. And she leaves you with the 3 daughters to take care of.
Yeah.
Wow.
It was, I'll never forget that day. I mean, you know, anytime you go through a divorce, the road leading to a divorce is difficult. And so it's not, you can't say it's a surprise when it happens necessarily, because you've seen the problems. But when that moment comes, when you realize, for me, I walked downstairs and the door to our bedroom was open and she was gone, there was something enormous about the weight, the gravity of that moment when you're having to just go, okay, this is it. Everyone says you'll know it when it happens, but this is like, this is it. This is that moment where everything kind of intersects and everything starts a new chapter. And the hardest thing for me was knowing that within a minute and a half, my girls were going to come running downstairs and say, "Where's mommy?" And then, how do you deal with that? What do you say? And that started the transformation in my life of going, okay, I can't just pretend anymore. I can't just play a role. So yeah, it was devastating.
Yeah, I think, and for us, you know, here we are, 3 of us around the table have all gone through, you know, divorce. And I think that does trigger. I remember you're confronted with, well, first of all, it's like, he's leaving, he's choosing to leave me. So obviously you go through like your abandonment issues, but then you have to have some self-reflection about why. What was it about me? You know, if even though someone leaves, was there part 2 that I'm responsible for? And it is tough. You realize you could either go one way or the other.
Right.
Like I could go delve into a whole dark place, or I can move forward in hope and
I'm really glad you say that, because I do think it is, and I think this is really important. In the book, I talk about this a lot, that we have a choice when we're a single parent, solo parent. We either define the season or the season defines us. We have a choice to either be bitter or broken. And broken is where God wants us, because that is where we are completely dependent on Him. And so if we pursue brokenness, if we embrace it, and we start realizing that that is the way God created us, with dependency needs for Him that only He can provide, we can start to see Him working in our lives beyond just going through the motions. You start seeing things on a different level.
I want to get to highs and lows of a solo parent. I want to bring all of us in, because all of us, like I said earlier, have all been impacted by a solo parent situation. Cheryl, you were raised by a single mom.
I was.
Right? And then Jen, single mom, Kim, single mom, and then my husband, Chris, raised by a single mom. So maybe you can help us sort of share a little bit about some of the challenges. And I want to bring you all in about your own challenges too, and some of the highs too, the good things that were part of that narrative too.
The lows, I think, there was some research done in America that said that 64% of single parents don't attend church because they feel like they don't belong and they feel judged. And so I would say one of the number one things that, and I now have the advantage of, we lead a solo parent group in Nashville, and we're a whole movement. So I've had the experience of talking to a lot of single parents. And I would say the number one thing that comes up is you don't know where you fit anymore. You don't belong anymore in the church groups that you were in. You don't belong in the couple groups, sometimes in the neighborhood that you were in. And you know, nobody knows how to act around you. The couples that you used to hang out with, like, what side are they going to take? So you don't know where you're going to fit. I mean, you don't know where you belong. And so what happens as a result of that is a lot of times you start isolating, or you start running towards superficial relationships. And either one of those things is not a healthy way to deal with things. So I'd say the number one thing is just not knowing where you belong. And then just the exhaustion and fatigue of keeping all the balls in the air. And, you know, it's a really overwhelming road. And I think for the people watching that are not single parents, to realize that there are single parents everywhere. I mean, everyone around this table. But I would say, I go so far as to say, anyone watching this in some way, shape, or form touches a single parent. You need to recognize that there is a massive amount of need in their lives that they won't come and talk to you about, because it's embarrassing to say, I don't know how I'm going to get this done, or I don't know. So look for opportunities that you can to help a single parent out there. So, but on the high side, I will say, like you were talking about, the memories that I have with my girls, and they were simple. I mean, but we were deliberate about doing some certain things in our family that were just special to us. And sometimes it was just sitting on the floor with a bucket of chocolate ice cream and a bunch of spoons. You know, sometimes it was we watched Planet Earth, the documentary.
Love
and
that.
it was just awesome, and just talking about how God created everything. And it doesn't have to be scripted to the extent where you are going, look, that's how God did this. So it's about connection. It's about choosing to build that relationship. And so I would say the highs are just the relationship that I have with my girls now is the prize of my life.
Yeah.
So that is definitely the high that came out of it. And one other thing.
Yes, of course.
Probably most importantly is I have never understood the love that my father has for me until this all fell apart.
Okay, that's a little bit of a...
Well, because we come to God with our roles and our this is what I've done for you, Jesus, and this is, this is how and he's like, I don't really care about all that. I just care about the Robert that I created. That is my son. That's what I want. And so for me, coming out of this, and that's a lot of what the book is about, is about the pursuit that God has for us exclusive to any roles that we play. And so those are the most significant things.
And that's hopeful, because I think for our experiences, Cheryl, and you can share, what were some of those challenging times being raised by a single mom?
Well, 3 words come to mind for me: capacity, bitterness, and design. And I feel, first and foremost, I was going to say, and you just nailed it, Robert. By the way, you're brilliant. Thank you for coming and sharing so honestly. Hurt left unchecked, unresolved, unprayed turns into anger. Anger done the same, unresolved, unprayed, forms a root of bitterness. And you spoke about that being bitter versus being broken. I was raised by a woman who did her very best in the way that she could, but was bitter by the circumstances of abandonment and not being chosen as the one, and seeing my dad sort of choose someone else and build this whole other family. And so that bitterness sort of filtered through in her parenting. And so I got the bitter side, which was not an indication of who she was, right?
It's a natural
outflow, which moves me to capacity. And I can bundle in design. I don't believe that God designed us to be both, like sort of, if I use a female, to be both father and mother. Those are 2 very distinct roles. They bring very distinct attributes and things to the table for a child. And when a parent is sort of trying to juggle both and be both, you run out of capacity very quickly. There's a massive furnace of frustration and anxiety. And, my mom was just overwhelmed all the time. And in that being overwhelmed, there was this frustration and anger and bitterness, and through that was coming through the parenting that I see now as she's a grandma. I'm like, hey, where's that lady?
It all changes with the grandkids.
And I'm like, she was like, but she was in this pressure cooker of life. Taking on 2 roles that she wasn't designed to be.
Right.
So that was my experience.
Good. That is really good. Jen, what about you? As a single mom, some of the challenges?
I think I made lots of mistakes when I was first a new single mom. I kind of went through the phase where it was sort of that, I don't know, revenge is too strong a word, but it's like, I'll show you. So I dated a bunch of like super glamorous people. And I mean, it was actually kind of fun, but it wasn't me. And then I went to the stage where I just wanted to go back to what I had before and pass as a normal family. I think there's so much shame about feeling like you can't be part of church and you can't be part of the world because, you're the person sitting by yourself at your kid's kindergarten grad, and you're the person sitting by yourself, and you just want to pass like a normal family so that the outside world thinks you're normal. So, went into a relationship, didn't go to God to it first. It looked like it was a normal relationship, and it turned out to be terrible. So after that, was my season of brokenness. It was just delayed because of, I kept throwing myself into these superficial relationships. So once in that season of brokenness, I remember feeling very abandoned by God, and like I really had no part of His kingdom. And then I remember coming across, but I still read Scripture, and I came across one of the Psalms. I think it's 84, and it's about the swallow building her nest to raise her young on God's altar. And for me, I thought I can do this on my own with God's help.
Yeah.
And when I got to that point and we had our, Food Network days, and I just, it was like, I may be a single parent for the rest of my life, and I'm okay with that, because if that's where I've been put through my own design or through God's plan, because, they work together, but I think sometimes we break out of his plan for a season, then I can do it.
Yeah.
And, then it, God did his thing, and I ended up moving in next door to my now husband. And
Which really was about really loving your neighbor.
yeah.
And then marrying your neighbor. Literally loving your neighbor.
We've got this sort of great blended family, and he was a widower, so he had his own story, and we've, managed to help each other heal. But it was that, not going to God first, and that's where I go back to involve him in the process. I felt like I couldn't pray about being divorced because he hates divorce and he wouldn't want to hear me. And that's when he wants to hear from you.
Good. Good, Jen. Thanks. Kim, what about you?
The brokenness is a beautiful place. And Robert and I've talked about this before, and that's where it's hard. It's lonely. I don't know how to change the filter in the furnace. I don't want to do all these. I'm tired all the time.
If there's a mouse, it's the worst.
We're moving. There's a mouse.
Pack your
mouse will stay there.
Yeah.
Who do I call?
Okay.
But the broken season was very good for me and very hard. But that is where Jesus really, just really said, I'm your husband. This is where I'm your husband. Let me woo you again, and I'll be your husband. And it's when that came, when I've made terrible mistakes, all kinds of mistakes, being a single mom. I think I'm ruining these kids' lives, always. But it's also those simple moments that are the most precious. And sometimes, and now I'm remarried and we've got a blended family, but sometimes when Brian goes on trips, the kids will say to me, hey, can we have a snack dinner like we used to when you weren't married? I'm like, yeah, sure, and we would eat chips for dinner. We would do that.
Robert, I love how you talk about the two parts, and we were talking about lows and highs. And I think just quickly about my husband. Father left and only saw him for an afternoon once a week. And mom, who I absolutely love, is a mom-in-law, 3 jobs.
Yeah.
3
There's
jobs
that.
to support Chris and his sister. And as I talked to Chris to prep for this show, he said, Melinda, the hardest is I wanted my dad. And I love my mom, and I have high respect for her. And the low was that I wanted both. I wanted both my mom and dad with me as I grew as a young man. And there was a lot of challenges, and he has quite a story. But the good, he said, is when I looked at what happened, I committed to myself that I was going to be a good dad. When I became a dad, I was going to be present. He actually used that word. He goes, I'm going to be present. I'm going to be with my kids. I'm going to spend time with them. We're going to enjoy just the small, simple things of life. And so I love how there are the lows, but when you walk the road of broken and you say, God, help me, there can be that redemption that comes through. And I see that in you.
Absolutely.
How does that make you
Well,
feel
I think
there?
it's on the other side of it, coming through, and it isn't easy. It's but God doesn't promise to pull us out of the valley of the shadow of death. He says, I'm going to be with you in the valley of the shadow of death. And so taking time, I think, was the most important thing for me, to just be still and to be reminded of his presence. And so it's counterintuitive, because with all the things that we've got to do, we don't have margin to cut out just a little bit of time to just be still. But I believe that when he says, be still and know that I'm God, that is it's an action. You need to be still. And so that is what started my path to the redemption and restoration of my life, because I started finding in those quiet moments that God was real and he was intimately aware of my situation. And as important, he was intimately aware of what was going on with my kids' lives. Because the hard thing is that we can't be mom and dad. And so we have to realize that God is writing a story in their lives as much as he is in our lives, and we have to trust him with that. We have to trust that whatever we are not able to provide as just being the dad or just being the mom, that God will make up the rest. And so he turns it into something that's redemptive and unbelievably restored.
I love that, because that kind of like launched you into starting Solo Parent Society and your book, this one here, Going Solo, Hope and Healing for the Single Mom and Dad. This one right here, I love kind of promoting that.
Thank you.
Talk to us about this, because from your experiences, you've written this, you've created this society. Obviously there's the need, but talk to us why and what's sort of been the feedback and what's your hope for this new venture for you?
Well, everything is about, 1 in 3 homes are single parent homes, and the statistics are overwhelming when you look at just, in our country, alcohol abuse, poverty, and suicide compared to solo parenting as an issue. All 3 of those things don't add up to combined how many single parents there are. And you flip that chart and you look at the statistic is that 66% of suicides in America come from single parent homes. 75% of kids that are in alcohol dependency clinics are from single parent homes. And the single moms make up 90% of our welfare in America. So this is a massive issue, and the church hasn't done a whole lot to embrace this. And I don't think it's because we don't care. I think it's we don't know what to do. And so our hope for the society is we have 3 things that we do. We provide resources, which is our podcast and ebooks and my book, obviously, and then we build communities. And so we've started Solo Parent Society groups that churches can start in their churches for single parents to come together and help each other. And then the third is that what we're launching in the fall, and that is relief and support to help network businesses and churches together with single parents to meet physical needs. And of course, the book is something that is kind of at the center of kind of our philosophy. And the philosophy is this is not something that we need to fix in people. This is something that God needs to restore. And it is not something that they need to be in the penalty zone until they get done being single parent and join the rest of us. This is something that with the right direction, with the right encouragement, with our communities or resources, that can turn into the most transformational season of their life. That's what the Solo Parent Society is all about.
It's awesome.
And from being left with 3 little girls to this.
I never would have thought.
Yeah, exactly. I was going to say.
This is not my roadmap.
Right.
It never is it?
No, it is not.
Ladies, any other final thoughts as we finish up the show on what Robert said or anything about your own experience with single parenting?
I got a whammy, man. My head's hurting me with this one. When you find yourself in solo parenting situations, divorce, painful moments in our lives, the rug pulling moments, the carpet being pulled, there's a choice to be bitter or be broken.
Yeah,
If you stay bitter and hard, the lessons that God is trying to teach you will be repeated and repeated and repeated. If you stay broken and open yet broken, those lessons will restore you.
That's true.
So in bitterness, the lessons will be repeated. But in brokenness, those lessons, if you allow them to come, will restore and heal you, your children, your family. And so much comes out of that, right? When you're restored and you've learned.
Well, a book comes out of that.
Right.
A book and a society. It's amazing. Jen, Kim, some last quick thoughts?
God doesn't like divorce, but God loves divorced people. And so if you are single, solo, going through this period, He wants to hear from you. That was the mistake I made. I didn't go there because I was ashamed, and it was my mistake. He loves you, and He wants to help you through it.
Yeah, it's true.
So good.
It's true.
Robert, thank you. Man, if we had another 3-hour marathon, we'd love it. Cheryl, Jen, Kim, thank you for your thoughts. And Robert, honestly, please come back from Nashville and hang out with us. I know that
I love Canada.
Oh, yay! Woo, look at us. Woo, because we're Canada. Yeah. And to you, our viewers, if you're a solo parent, we're praying courage and resilience and hope and peace and grace and joy into your life right now. You can do this. Look at Robert and Kimberly and Jen. They've done it. Look where Cheryl is, being raised by a single mama, and my husband, Chris. Their stories were shared today to inspire and encourage you. God is with you. He will always be with you. When you're overwhelmed by bills and laundry and sick kids and play dates and work and deep, heart-wrenching loneliness, and when you feel the pain will never end, He is with you. So we pray for a vibrant community to support you, much grace extended to you, and hope to guide and direct you. And if we can help you in any way, please connect with us on Facebook or Instagram, as well as through our website, seehearlove.com. And thanks so much for watching. And make sure you follow us online for more blogs and vlogs about our solo parenting topic today. And always know, if you're a solo parent, single parent, divorced person, that you are seen, heard, and deeply, deeply loved by God. Bye-bye.